You really shouldn't have done that. 6 words. That's all it took to make Victoria Langford, the woman who'd made senators weep and CEOs resign, start trembling so violently her diamond bracelet slipped off her wrist and shattered against the restaurant floor. But before I tell you about that night at La Serena, before I explain how one sentence unraveled a billion-dollar empire in 72 hours, let me ask you something. Do you believe in consequences? Not the kind that comes from courts or headlines, but the kind that shows up when you least expect it, wearing a server's apron and carrying the weight of every life you've destroyed? I do. Because I've seen it happen. My name is Amara Jones, and this story isn't really about me. It's about what happens when cruelty finally meets its match, when the untouchable discover they've been living on borrowed time, and when silence decides it's done protecting monsters. Hey, how are you doing today? Seriously, I want to know. Are you watching this from your couch, maybe during lunch break, or late at night when you can't sleep? Drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from. The weather here in Belmont is deceptively beautiful, all coastal sunshine and salt air, the kind of place that looks perfect in photographs while hiding rot underneath. This is the story of how I went from being invisible, just another face serving overpriced seafood to people who'd never remember my name, to becoming the nightmare that Victoria Langford still sees when she closes her eyes. If she's even sleeping anymore. If they haven't arrested her yet. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, from the moment I walked into La Serena on a Tuesday evening in late September, tying on a black apron I'd bought that morning, carrying nothing but a notepad and information that had taken me 5 years to gather. 5 years, 3 months, and 17 days, if we're counting. Which I was. I was 28 years old when I started working at La Serena. 28, and I'd already learned that justice doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it wears non-slip shoes and carries a tray of appetizers. Sometimes it smiles politely while powerful people treat it like furniture, waiting for the exact right moment to remind them that furniture has eyes and ears and a memory that doesn't forget. The other servers warned me about Victoria on my first day. Well, they tried to warn me. Most of them couldn't finish their sentences. If she comes in, Jessica, the veteran waitress with 15 years at La Serena, told me while we rolled silverware during the pre-shift meeting, just stay out of her section. Trade with someone. Fake sick. I don't care. Do not serve Victoria Langford unless you absolutely have to. What's she going to do? I asked, keeping my voice curious, innocent. Yell at me. Jessica's laugh was sharp and bitter. Yell. Honey, yelling would be a mercy. Victoria Langford doesn't yell. She destroys. Methodically. Personally. I watched her get a server fired last year because the girl brought her water with ice when she'd asked for no ice. The girl apologized, brought a new glass in under 30 seconds, but Victoria called the owner, said she'd seen the server spit in it. Completely made it up. The girl was working 2 jobs to support her kid. Victoria knew that. She smiled while security escorted her out. That's horrible, I said, and I meant it. Though horrible didn't even begin to cover what Victoria Langford had done. What she was capable of. What she'd already gotten away with. She's married to Charles Langford, another server, Marcus added. He was young, maybe 22, still idealistic enough to be shocked by cruelty. You know, the investor? They live in that massive estate up on Cliffside Drive. The one with the rose garden you can see from the coastal highway. My hands didn't shake when he mentioned the rose garden. I practiced for this. Practiced keeping my face neutral, my breathing steady, my voice level. I've seen it, I said. Beautiful property. Beautiful on the outside, Jessica muttered. They say staff won't last more than a week working there. Something about the way Victoria treats people. Like they're not even human to her. Like they're disposable, I thought. Like they don't matter. Like no one will notice when they disappear. But I didn't say that. Instead, I smiled and said, good to know. I'll do my best to avoid her table. Except I wasn't going to avoid her table. I'd taken this job specifically for her table. I'd spent months learning La Serena's schedule, understanding when Victoria came in, which section she preferred, what time she arrived for her standing Tuesday reservation. Every Tuesday at 7. Table 12, the corner booth with the view of the water. 3 martinis, always Grey Goose, always extra olives. She'd nursed the first 2 and down the third right before her meal arrived. Salmon when she was in a good mood, steak when she was feeling vindictive. The staff could tell which kind of night it would be by her order. Salmon meant maybe only one person would end up crying in the walk-in cooler. Steak meant everyone was in danger. I'd memorized all of this, along with so much more. That first Tuesday, Victoria came in at 6:45, 15 minutes early, already furious about something. I watched from the service station as she swept through the entrance in a cream designer dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, her expression carved from ice. She was beautiful in the way a knife is beautiful. Sharp, cold, dangerous if you got too close. The host, Danny, a college kid saving for tuition, visibly paled when he saw her. "Mrs. Langford," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Your table isn't quite ready yet. If you'd like to wait at the bar." "Not ready." Her voice could have cut glass. "I have a standing reservation. Every Tuesday. Same time. Same table. For 3 years. And you're telling me it's not ready." "There were some guests who ran over their time, and we're just finishing." "I don't care about your excuses." Victoria's eyes were the color of winter storms. "Get me the manager. Now." I moved before I could stop myself. Not to intervene, not yet. Just to position myself where I could see her clearly, where I could study the woman I'd been researching for 5 years. She looked different in person than in photographs. Older, though she'd clearly had work done. There were lines around her mouth that surgery couldn't erase, the kind that come from years of sneering at people she considered beneath her. Her hands, clutching a designer purse, were tense, the knuckles white. She was high-strung, volatile, one wrong word away from exploding. Perfect. The manager, Thomas, came rushing out, already apologizing, already placating. "Mrs. Langford, I'm so sorry for the wait. Your table will be ready in just 2 minutes. Can I offer you a complimentary cocktail while?" "I don't want a complimentary cocktail. I want my table. The one I reserve. The one I pay for with my presence in this establishment." Her presence. As if she was doing La Serena a favor by spending her husband's money here. As if the staff should be grateful for the opportunity to be abused by her. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger. I'd moved past anger years ago. This was something else. Something patient and precise. This was purpose. Thomas personally walked Victoria to her table once it was ready, hovering nervously while she inspected the setup, checking for smudges on the glassware, running her finger along the edge of the table to test for dust that wouldn't be there. She was performing. Establishing dominance. Making sure everyone in the restaurant knew she was important, powerful, untouchable. I watched her settle into the booth, watched her order her first martini from Jessica, who looked like she wanted to run. Watched her pull out her phone and start texting, probably to Charles, probably complaining about the service, about the wait, about whatever else she decided to be furious about today. And I thought about Destiny. My sister. 23 years old, brilliant, kind, with a laugh that could light up a room and dreams of becoming a nurse. She'd taken a temporary job at the Langford estate 5 years ago, needing quick money for her final semester of nursing school. The job posting said it was housekeeping, light duties, good pay. It was supposed to be 3 months. She disappeared after 6 weeks. The police said she'd probably run off with a boyfriend. That young women did that sometimes. That there was no evidence of foul play, no signs of struggle, nothing to suggest she hadn't just decided to leave without telling anyone. Except Destiny would never do that. She wouldn't leave without telling me. We talked every day. Every single day. And then suddenly, nothing. Her phone disconnected. Her bank account untouched. Her apartment exactly as she'd left it, including her nursing textbooks laid out for studying. She'd vanished like smoke. And the last text I got from her, at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday night, said, "Amara, I found something. In the rose garden. I think I should call the police, but I'm scared. Mrs. L is acting strange. Call you tomorrow." There was no tomorrow. At least not for Destiny. I reported her missing. I went to the police. I hired a private investigator with money I didn't have. I camped outside the Langford estate until security threatened me with restraining orders. I contacted every news outlet, every missing persons organization, every resource I could find. Nothing. Destiny became a statistic. Another young black woman who disappeared, and nobody cared enough to keep looking. Except me. I never stopped looking. And over 5 years of searching, of digging, of learning everything I could about Victoria and Charles Langford, I found things. Not enough for the police, not enough for a conviction, but enough to know that my sister had stumbled onto something that night in the rose garden. Something that Victoria couldn't let become public. Something worth killing to protect. And now, after 5 years of preparation, I was standing 15 feet away from the woman who'd taken my sister from me, holding a notepad and wearing a smile that I'd practiced in the mirror until it looked genuine. It was time. But not yet. Not tonight. Tonight I needed to establish myself. Tonight I needed to become part of the furniture, just another server, invisible and harmless. Tonight, Victoria Langford was safe. But only for tonight. My training at La Serena was unremarkable by design. I was competent but not memorable, friendly but not chatty, efficient without being aggressive. The other servers warmed to me gradually. I listened to their stories, laughed at their jokes, covered their shifts when they needed it. I became part of the team. Jessica took me under her wing, showing me the rhythms of the restaurant, which tables tipped well, which guests had dietary restrictions that weren't listed on their reservations. She was a good person, worn down by years of service work, but still holding on to her kindness like a lifeline. "You're different from most new hires," she told me one night while we cleaned our sections after closing. "Usually people your age are either saving for something specific or stuck in some transitional phase. You seem focused." "Student loans," I lied smoothly. I'd prepared a whole backstory, trying to pay them off before they consume my entire life. "What did you study?" "Criminal justice." That part was true. I'd gone back to school after Destiny disappeared, taking night classes, learning everything I could about investigations, evidence collection, legal procedures. Knowledge that would help me find my sister. Knowledge that eventually helped me understand why the police had stopped looking. Because the Langfords had money. And money bought things. Including silence. "Criminal justice," Jessica repeated thoughtfully. "Ever think about becoming a cop?" "Every day," I said, and that was true too. But I realized I could do more good outside the system than inside it. She didn't question what that meant. Most people don't, when you tell them things with enough confidence. 3 weeks into my employment, I finally got assigned to Victoria's section. Thomas pulled me aside before the shift, his expression grave. "Mrs. Langford will be here tonight," he said. "I need you on your best behavior. No mistakes. No diles. Anticipate her needs before she asks. And whatever you do, don't take anything she says personally." "Understood," I said. "I'm serious, Amara. She's already gotten 2 servers fired this year. She has the owner's personal number. 1 complaint, and you're done." I nodded solemnly, playing the role of nervous new employee. "I'll be perfect." "Nobody's perfect with Victoria Langford," Thomas muttered. "Just try to be invisible." Invisible. Exactly what I'd been for the past 5 years while I researched, while I planned, while I waited for this exact moment. Victoria arrived at 7 sharp, alone. Charles was away on business, according to the brief conversation she had with Thomas. She seemed more agitated than usual, checking her phone constantly, her jaw tight with tension. I approached her table with a water glass and the wine list, my movements smooth and practiced. "Good evening, Mrs. Langford. My name is Amara, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." She didn't look up from her phone. "Martini. Grey Goose. 3 olives. And I want the glassware properly chilled this time. Last week it was room temperature." "Of course. I'll make sure it's perfect." "You do that," she said, her tone dismissive, final. I walked to the bar, placed the order with Kevin, the bartender who'd been there longest and knew exactly how Victoria liked her drinks. While he prepared it, I studied her from across the room. She was texting furiously, her lips pressed into a thin line. Whatever she was dealing with, it was making her more volatile than usual. That could work in my favor, or it could be dangerous. I needed to be careful. Kevin handed me the martini, the glass properly frosted, the olive speared exactly right. I delivered it to Victoria's table, placing it precisely where she could reach it without extending her arm. "Thank you," she said without looking at me. Not gratitude, just acknowledgement that I'd performed my function. I was furniture to her. An object. Something that existed only to serve her needs. Just like destiny had been. The thought sent ice through my veins, but I kept my expression neutral, my voice pleasant. "Have you decided on your dinner order, or would you like a few more minutes?" "The salmon. Medium rare. If it's overcooked, I'm sending it back." "Absolutely. Any sides?" "Do I need to order sides? Doesn't it come with sides?" "Yes, ma'am, it comes with asparagus and roasted potatoes. I just wanted to confirm you didn't want to substitute anything." She finally looked up at me, her cold eyes scanning my face like I was a specimen under glass. "You're new. Started 3 weeks ago. Figures. The competent ones never last here." She went back to her phone. "That will be all." I submitted her order to the kitchen and spent the next 40 minutes managing my other tables while keeping Victoria in my peripheral vision. She went through her first martini quickly, ordered a second before I could ask. Her texting became more aggressive, her posture more rigid. Something was bothering her. Something significant. When I delivered her salmon, perfectly cooked to her specifications, she barely glanced at it. "Another martini," she commanded. "Right away." This was the third. The dangerous one. The one that loosened her carefully controlled facade and let the real Victoria show through. The cruel one. The vicious one. The one who hurt people because she could. I brought her the third martini and watched as she downed half of it in 2 long swallows. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it, and something in her expression shifted from annoyance to fury. This was going to be a steak night, even though she'd ordered salmon. "Is everything all right with your meal?" I asked, keeping my tone gentle, concerned. "Does it look all right?" she snapped. "Look at this." She gestured at the salmon, which was cooked exactly as she'd ordered. "This is medium, not medium rare." I specifically said medium rare. "I apologize. I'll have them remake it immediately." "Don't bother." She pushed the plate away with enough force that it nearly slid off the table. "I've lost my appetite. Just bring me the check." "Of course. And please, this meal is on us for the inconvenience." "I don't want it on you," Victoria said, her voice rising. "I want competent service. I want to come to a restaurant I've been patronizing for years and receive what I ask for. Is that too much to expect?" Other diners were starting to look over. Jessica caught my eye from across the room, her expression sympathetic. Thomas was already moving toward the table, his face arranged in professional concern. "Mrs. Langford," he began, "I'm so sorry." "Save it." Victoria stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. "I'm leaving. And I'll be calling Richard tomorrow to discuss the declining standards of this establishment." Richard was the owner. The threat was clear. She swept toward the exit, leaving her barely touched meal and half-finished martini. Thomas followed, still apologizing, still trying to smooth things over. I stood at the table, looking at the salmon that was cooked exactly right, the potatoes she hadn't touched, the asparagus arranged precisely as the kitchen prepared it. Perfect. All of it perfect. But perfection didn't matter to Victoria Langford. Power did. Control did. The ability to make people scramble and apologize and fear her. Jessica appeared at my elbow. Don't take it personally. She does this at least once a month. Finds some excuse to be furious, threatens to get someone fired, then comes back next week like nothing happened. She always comes back. Always. She needs places where people know to be afraid of her. It's like oxygen for her. I cleaned the table slowly, methodically, thinking about what Jessica had said. Victoria needed to feel powerful. Needed to be feared. It was essential to her sense of self, her identity. Which meant taking that away from her would be devastating. Which was exactly the point. 4 weeks passed. I served Victoria 3 more times, each encounter similar to the first. She was demanding, dismissive, occasionally cruel. Twice she sent back perfectly prepared meals. Once she made a busboy cry because he refilled her water glass when it was only half empty instead of waiting until it was completely empty. I played my part. Apologetic. Eager to please. Forgettable. And while I played that part, I watched. I listened. I gathered information. Victoria always sat at table 12. She always came on Tuesdays. She usually came alone, though occasionally Charles joined her. When he did, she was slightly less terrible, as if his presence required her to wear a thinner mask. But Charles was away a lot. Business trips, she said. Investor meetings. Conferences. I started to wonder if Charles traveled so much because it meant less time with Victoria. If he'd built his life around avoiding his wife. I also noticed the phone calls. Victoria would step outside between courses, returning with her jaw tight and her eyes cold. Someone was calling her regularly, and whatever they were saying, it was making her increasingly unstable. It all came to a head on a Tuesday in late October. Victoria arrived at 6:30, half an hour early, already 3 drinks deep from wherever she'd come from. Thomas tried to seat her at a different table since 12 wasn't ready, and she nearly threw her purse at him. I want my table, she said, her words slightly slurred. I don't care who's sitting there. Tell them to move. Mrs. Langford, they're in the middle of their meal. I don't care. Her voice carried across the entire restaurant. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my husband is? One phone call, Thomas. One phone call and this place is finished. I watched from the service station, my heart steady, my breathing controlled. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. She was drunk enough to be volatile, sober enough to remember, and angry enough to cross lines she normally wouldn't. Thomas managed to convince the couple at table 12 to move to the private dining area, comping their entire meal. They left quickly, sensing the dangerous energy radiating from Victoria. She dropped into the booth with the graceless aggression of someone who'd stopped caring about appearances. I approached with water and a menu, even though she always ordered the same thing. Good evening, Mrs. Langford. She looked up at me, and I saw something new in her eyes. Not just cruelty, fear. Whatever was happening in her life, whatever those phone calls were about, she was scared. Scared people are dangerous. They lash out. They attack. They do terrible things to prove they're still in control. You, she said, pointing at me with one manicured finger. You're the new girl. The one who can't get my order right. I always get your order exactly as you request it, ma'am. Don't contradict me. Her voice was ice. I said you get it wrong. Are you calling me a liar? This was the game. Say yes, you're a liar, and she'd have me fired for insubordination. Say no, and accept her false accusation, and she'd have me fired for incompetence. I chose option 3. I would never call you a liar, Mrs. Langford. I'm simply confirming that I follow your instructions exactly. If there's been any miscommunication, I take full responsibility. Her eyes narrowed. She wasn't used to responses that didn't give her leverage. Bring me my usual. And don't mess it up this time. Of course. I submitted her order and returned to my other tables, but I kept her in my sight. She was on her phone again, texting rapidly, her free hand tapping against the table in agitated rhythm. Whatever was happening, it was escalating. When I brought her martini, she grabbed it from my hand so fast some sloshed onto the table. Napkins, she demanded. I provided them. She didn't say thank you. Her salmon arrived from the kitchen exactly 15 minutes later, plated beautifully, cooked to her exact specifications. I'd watched the chef prepare it myself, had confirmed every detail. I placed it in front of her. Your salmon, Mrs. Langford. Medium rare, as always. She stared at it for a long moment. Then, with deliberate slowness, she picked up her fork and knife, cut into the salmon, and examined it. This, she said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, is not medium rare. This is medium. I specifically said medium rare. Ma'am, I watched the chef prepare it myself. Are you arguing with me? No, I'm just. Get the manager. No. My pulse stayed steady. This was the pattern. She'd complain, make a scene, get someone in trouble. Standard Victoria behavior. Except tonight, something was different. Tonight, she was spiraling. Thomas appeared, already apologizing. Mrs. Langford, I'm so sorry. Let me have the kitchen prepare anew. I don't want a new one. Victoria's voice cracked like a whip. I want this one right. I want people to listen when I talk. I want to stop being treated like I don't matter. That last part came out raw, real. For just a second, the mask slipped, and I saw what was underneath. Not just cruelty. Desperation. Whatever was happening with those phone calls, it was destroying her carefully constructed world. Of course you matter, Thomas said soothingly. You're one of our most valued guests. Don't patronize me. She stood abruptly, and that's when it happened. She grabbed her plate, and in one violent motion, hurled it across the table. It hit the floor and shattered. Salmon and asparagus and broken ceramic scattered across the polished wood. The entire restaurant went silent. This is unacceptable. Victoria Sriekev. All of it. This service, this restaurant, this stupid girl, she pointed at me, who can't follow simple instructions. I want her fired. Right now. Or I'm calling Richard and having your entire staff replaced. Thomas looked at me helplessly. He was caught between keeping his job and protecting his employee. We both knew which way that balance would tip. I should have felt angry. I should have felt humiliated. Everyone was staring. Some people had their phones out, recording. But instead, I felt calm. Because everything was going exactly according to plan. I looked at Victoria Langford, this woman who'd spent her life terrifying people, who'd gotten away with cruelty because money bought immunity, who'd killed my sister and slept soundly because no one had ever made her face consequences. And I smiled. Not the polite, practiced smile I'd been using for weeks. A real smile. The kind that carries weight. The kind that says I know something you don't. You really shouldn't have done that, I said quietly. Victoria blinked, confused by my tone. What? I took one step closer, still smiling, my voice dropping so only she and Thomas could hear. You really shouldn't have done that, Mrs. Langford. Because I know exactly who you buried in your rose garden. The blood drained from Victoria's face so fast I thought she might faint. Her hand flew to her throat, clutching at nothing. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. What? She finally managed. What did you? The rose garden at your estate on Cliffside Drive, I continued, my voice conversational, friendly even. The one with the prize-winning roses that bloom so beautifully every spring. The ones you tend yourself, personally, even though you have a whole staff of gardeners. Funny, isn't it? How much care you give to that specific patch of earth. Victoria stumbled backward, knocking against the booth. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. I tilted my head, studying her like she'd studied me. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And so do I. All of it. Every detail. Her whole body was shaking now. That diamond bracelet she always wore, the one that cost more than most people's annual salary, slipped off her wrist with a sound like breaking glass and shattered against the marble floor. The metaphor was almost too perfect. Thomas looked between us, confused and alarmed. Amara, what's? But Victoria wasn't looking at Thomas. She was staring at me like I was a ghost come to life. Who are you? She whispered. I told you, I said softly. I'm Amara, the new waitress. The one you thought you could treat like furniture. Like nothing. Like she didn't matter. No, Victoria, breathe. No, who are you really? I leaned in just slightly, close enough that only she could hear my next words. I'm Destiny Jones's sister. Remember Destiny? Young, bright, worked at your house for 6 weeks before she disappeared? Before you made her disappear. Victoria made a sound like a wounded animal. Around us, phones were still recording. The entire restaurant was watching. They couldn't hear what I was saying, but they could see Victoria's reaction. The fear. The guilt. The complete unraveling of someone who'd always been in control. You need to leave, I said, straightening up, my voice returning to normal volume. Right now. Before this gets worse for you. She didn't argue. She grabbed her purse with shaking hands and ran. Actually ran, stumbling in her expensive heels, nearly falling as she pushed through the restaurant doors and into the night. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Then the entire restaurant erupted in conversation. Thomas grabbed my arm. Amara, what just happened? What did you say to her? I told her the truth, I said simply. Something nobody else has had the courage to do. What truth? What are you talking about? I looked at him, this man who'd spent years apologizing to Victoria, placating her, enabling her cruelty because she had money and power and the ability to destroy his career. Call the police, I said. Tell them to reopen the investigation into Destiny Jones. Tell them to get a warrant for the Langford estate. Specifically for the Rose Garden. You're not making any sense. I'm making perfect sense. I untied my apron, folded it neatly, and set it on the table. And by tomorrow morning, you'll understand why. I walked out of La Serena the same way Victoria had, except I wasn't running. I was walking with purpose, with certainty, with 5 years of grief and rage and careful planning finally coming to fruition. Behind me, I could hear Thomas on the phone. Could hear the confused murmur of diners. Could hear the world starting to shift, slowly at first, then faster. By tomorrow, everyone would know Victoria Langford's name. But not because they feared her. Because they'd finally learned what she'd done. The video went viral in under 4 hours. Someone at La Serena had posted it on social media. Actually, several people had. From different angles, different tables, all capturing the same moment. Victoria Langford, the untouchable ice queen of Belmont, shaking like a leaf while a black waitress in a simple uniform spoke 6 quiet words that made her run from the restaurant like the building was on fire. By morning, it had 3 million views. By afternoon, 12 million. By the time the sun set the next day, Victoria Langford's public breakdown had become the most talked about moment on the internet. I watched it all unfold from the small apartment I'd rented 6 months ago under a different name, 3 towns over from Belmont. The apartment was bare, furnished only with the essentials I'd need for what came next. A laptop. Charging cables. 5 years' worth of research printed out and organized in labeled folders. A burner phone I'd been using to communicate with the one journalist who'd actually listened when I told him about Destiny. His name was Marcus Chin. No, wait. I promised myself no common names. His name was Ethan Rivera, and he worked for a small investigative outlet that specialized in cases the major networks wouldn't touch. Cold cases. Missing persons. Stories about people society had decided didn't matter enough to keep searching for. People like Destiny. I'd contacted Ethan 8 months ago with everything I'd found. Bank records showing large cash withdrawals from the Langford accounts the week Destiny disappeared. Phone records showing Victoria had called a number registered to a private investigation firm known for making problems disappear. Testimony from former Langford estate employees about strange activities in the rose garden, about soil deliveries that didn't match any landscaping work, about Victoria's obsessive control over that specific area of the property. None of it was enough for the police to act on. But it was enough for Ethan to start digging. And what he'd found matched everything I'd suspected. My phone rang at 6:47 a.m. the morning after the restaurant incident. Ethan's number. "You did it," he said without preamble. "You actually pulled it off. She's completely unraveling. The video is everywhere. People are already asking questions about the rose garden comment. The police are getting flooded with calls demanding they reopen the investigation into your sister's case." "Have they issued the warrant yet?" "Not yet. But I spoke to my contact in the department. They're reviewing the case file this morning. With the public pressure from the video and the evidence we've compiled, they won't have a choice. The warrant should come through by end of day." I closed my eyes, feeling something crack open in my chest. Relief. Terror. Grief. 5 years of holding everything together, and now it was finally happening. "Amara." Ethan's voice was gentle. "You still there?" "Yeah. Sorry. Just processing." "I know this is hard. But you should also know that Charles Langford released a statement an hour ago. He's claiming Victoria has been under tremendous stress, that she's been receiving threatening phone calls from an unknown stalker, and that what happened at the restaurant was the result of someone targeting and harassing his wife. Of course he did. Of course the first move was to paint Victoria as the victim. "The phone calls were from me," I said. "From different numbers, different locations. I've been calling her for 3 weeks, playing recordings of Destiny's last voicemail to me. The one where she sounds scared. Where she mentions finding something in the rose garden. Jesus, Amara. She needed to know someone was coming for her. She needed to feel what Destiny felt. Scared. Hunted. Alone." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "That's going to complicate things legally. If this goes to trial." "It won't go to trial if there's no body," I interrupted. "That's why the warrant matters. That's why we need them to dig up that garden before the Langfords can do anything about it." "I'm working on it. I've got a cameraman ready to go as soon as the police move. We'll document everything. If there's anything there." "There's something there," I said with absolute certainty. "I know it." After we hung up, I pulled up the video again. Watched myself smile at Victoria. Watched her face drain of color. Watched that bracelet slip off her wrist and shatter. The comments were vicious. People calling Victoria entitled, cruel, karma in action. But mixed in with the schadenfreude were other comments. People asking real questions. Who was buried in the rose garden? What did the waitress know? Was this about the missing girl from 5 years ago? Someone had already made the connection. A true crime blogger had dug up Destiny's missing person case, noticed that she'd worked at the Langford estate, noticed the timing. They'd posted a thread connecting the dots, and it was spreading almost as fast as the original video. The narrative was building. And once a narrative takes hold online, it's almost impossible to stop. My second phone rang. The burner. Only 3 people had that number, and one of them was dead. I answered. "Hello. Is this Amara Jones?" A woman's voice, professional, controlled. "Who's asking?" "My name is Detective Lisa Vaughn. I'm with Belmont PD. I need to speak with you about the incident at La Serena last night." My heart rate kicked up, but I kept my voice steady. "Okay. Okay. Can you come down to the station? This afternoon, if possible. Am I being charged with something? No. Nothing like that. We just need to ask you some questions about your interaction with Victoria Langford. And about your sister, Destiny Jones. They were taking it seriously. They were actually investigating. I'll be there at 2, I said. Thank you. And Miss Jones, bring any documentation you have regarding your sister's case. Anything at all. I brought everything. 3 accordion folders full of papers, photos, timelines, phone records, witness statements I'd collected myself when the police had stopped caring. I laid it all out on the table in the interview room while Detective Vaughn and her partner, a younger man named Officer Hayes, watched. This is extensive, Vaughn said, flipping through the first folder. You've been investigating this on your own for 5 years? The police stopped looking after 3 months, I said. Someone had to keep searching. We didn't stop looking. Yes, you did. I met her eyes. You decided Destiny was a runaway. Case closed. Never mind that she had no reason to run, that her entire life was in Belmont, that she was 6 weeks away from graduating nursing school. You decided she didn't matter enough to keep searching. Vaughn had the grace to look uncomfortable. Miss Jones, I wasn't on the case at the time, but I've reviewed the file. I understand your frustration. Do you? I kept my voice level, professional. Getting angry wouldn't help. Do you understand what it's like to know someone killed your sister and watch them live their life like nothing happened? To see them at restaurants, at charity galas, in the society pages, smiling and beautiful and free while your sister is in the ground somewhere. That's what we're trying to determine, Hayes said. If you have evidence that suggests foul play. I have evidence that suggests Victoria Langford is a psychopath who's been getting away with cruelty for years because she has money. I pulled out a specific folder. This contains statements from 12 former Langford estate employees. Every single one describes Victoria as unstable, violent, and obsessed with controlling everyone around her. 3 of them mention her threatening them. One mentions seeing her hit a gardener with a shovel when he tried to work on the rose garden without her supervision. Vaughn read through the statements carefully. Why didn't any of these people come forward when your sister disappeared? Because they were paid not to. Because they signed NDAs. Because Victoria Langford has an army of lawyers who make problems disappear. I leaned forward. But I didn't sign anything. And I'm not going away. Miss Jones, Vaughn said carefully, I need to ask you about the phone calls. Charles Langford claims his wife has been receiving harassing calls for several weeks. Calls that play disturbing audio recordings. Did you make those calls? I prepared for this. I called Victoria Langford 3 times from different numbers. I never threatened her. I never used profanity. I played recordings of my sister's voice because I wanted Victoria to remember who she'd hurt. To remember that Destiny was a real person with a real family who loved her. That could be considered harassment. So could killing someone and burying them in your garden. Hayes's eyebrows went up. You're stating that as fact, not speculation. I'm stating what I believe happened based on 5 years of investigation. Destiny texted me about finding something in the rose garden. She disappeared that same night. The next day, Victoria personally oversaw a complete replanting of that section of the garden. She brought in new soil, new roses, everything. In the middle of winter. And she's maintained personal control of that area ever since, refusing to let anyone else work on it. How do you know all this? I talked to the gardeners who worked there at the time. I tracked down the company that delivered the soil. I have receipts, delivery schedules, everything. I pulled out another folder. It's all here. Vaughn exchanged a look with Hayes. We're going to need to keep copies of all this. Keep the originals. I have backups. Miss Jones, I have to ask. Why didn't you bring this to us before? Why the confrontation at the restaurant? I did bring it to you. 5 years ago. Last year. 6 months ago. Every time, I was told there wasn't enough evidence to pursue. That I was a grieving sister seeing conspiracies where there were none. I held her gaze. So I made my own evidence. I made it impossible for you to ignore. By provoking Victoria Langford in public. By telling her the truth in a place where it would be recorded. Where witnesses would see her reaction. Where the whole world would start asking the same questions I've been asking for 5 years. I paused. Did it work? Vaughn was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "We've submitted a request for a warrant to search the Langford estate. Specifically the Rose Garden. It should be approved within 24 hours. The relief that flooded through me was so intense I had to grip the edge of the table. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Even if we get the warrant, even if we find something, this is going to be complicated. The Langfords have resources. They'll fight this every step of the way. Let them fight, I said. At least now everyone's watching." I left the police station at 4:30, just as the sun was starting to dip toward the horizon. My phone was exploding with notifications. Friend requests from strangers, messages from journalists wanting interviews, even a few death threats from people who thought I was lying about Victoria for attention. But mixed in with all of that was a text from Ethan, "Warrant approved. They're executing it tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I'll be there." And then, an hour later, another text, "You should see this." He'd attached a link to a live news broadcast. I clicked it and saw a reporter standing outside the Langford estate gates. "Breaking news tonight from Belmont, where police have obtained a warrant to search the property of billionaire investor Charles Langford and his wife, Victoria. The warrant specifically authorizes the excavation of the estate's rose garden in connection with the 2020 disappearance of Destiny Jones, a then 23-year-old woman who worked briefly as a housekeeper at the property." The camera cut to footage of Victoria from the restaurant, her face white with fear, stumbling backward. Then to a photo of Destiny, beautiful and smiling, taken just weeks before she vanished. The pay is incredible," she'd said, stirring sugar into her latte. "Like 3 times what I'd make anywhere else. And it's only for 3 months. By the time I'm done, I'll have enough saved for graduation and the first few months after while I'm looking for nursing positions. 3 times the normal rate." I'd been suspicious even then. Why so much? Mrs. Langford is apparently very particular about her staff. High turnover rate. So they pay premium to get people to stay. Destiny had shrugged. "I can handle particular. It's 3 months. How bad can it be?" Famous last words. I thought about calling her that last morning, about checking in one more time before the police arrived at the Langford estate. But Destiny's phone had been disconnected for 5 years. There was no one to call. Instead, I drove to Belmont at 6 a.m., parking 3 blocks from the Langford property where media vans were already setting up. Ethan had texted me the location where he'd be filming from, a public overlook that had a clear view of the estate grounds. I found him with his cameraman, adjusting equipment. When he saw me, his expression shifted to concern. "You sure you want to be here for this?" he asked. "I've been waiting 5 years. I'm not missing it now. Amara, if they find—" He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "If they find her, then I'll finally know for sure. If they don't find her, then I'll keep looking." I kept my voice steady, but my hands were shaking. Either way, at least something is finally happening. At exactly 8 a.m., 3 police vehicles and a forensics van pulled up to the Langford gates. The gates opened, and they drove through. From our vantage point, I could see figures moving around the rose garden, setting up equipment, marking off areas. "They're bringing in ground-penetrating radar first," Ethan said, holding binoculars. "Standard procedure. They'll scan the area, look for anomalies in the soil, determine where to dig." "How long will that take?" "Could be hours. Could be all day." He lowered the binoculars and looked at me. You know this is going to be hard regardless of what they find, right? Nothing about the last 5 years has been easy. We waited. The morning stretched into afternoon. More media arrived, creating a circus atmosphere that made my skin crawl. This wasn't entertainment. This was my sister's life. My sister's death. But I understood the game. The attention was necessary. Without it, the Langfords could make this all disappear again. With every camera pointed at that estate, with millions of people watching online, they couldn't hide anymore. At 2:15 p.m., everything changed. I saw it before anyone else noticed. A detective near the garden waved other officers over. They clustered around something, and even from a distance, I could see their body language shift. Urgent. Serious. Something's happening, I said. Ethan raised his camera. The other news crews were starting to notice too, zooming in, commentators speculating about what the activity meant. A forensics team member went to the van and returned with what looked like marking flags. They started placing them in the ground. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. They found something, Ethan said quietly. Multiple sites. Look at the pattern of the flags. He was right. The flags weren't in one location. They were scattered across the rose garden in what looked like 4 or 5 distinct areas. That doesn't make sense, I said. Unless. Understanding hit me like a physical blow. Unless Destiny wasn't the only one. Oh my God, I breathed. There are others. Ethan's face had gone pale. We don't know that yet. The flags could mark anything. Disturbed soil, roots, buried debris. But I knew. I could feel it in my bones, in the same instinct that had told me from the beginning that Victoria had killed my sister. This wasn't just about Destiny. This was about a pattern. A habit. Years of cruelty escalating into something worse. An hour later, Detective Vaughn emerged from the estate and approached the media cluster. Every camera focused on her. Every reporter shouted questions. She held up a hand for silence. At approximately 2 p.m. today, during the execution of a search warrant at the Langford estate, forensic teams detected multiple anomalies in the Rose Garden area using ground-penetrating radar. We are in the process of carefully excavating these sites. I cannot provide additional details at this time, but I can confirm that we have expanded our investigation and are now looking into several missing person cases with potential connections to this property. The reporters erupted with questions, but Vaughn walked away without answering any of them. Several cases. Multiple anomalies. My phone started ringing. News outlets wanting comments. True crime podcasters requesting interviews. But I couldn't move. I just stood there, watching the Langford estate, thinking about all the young women who'd worked there over the years. The ones who'd disappeared and been written off as runaways. As girls who couldn't handle the pressure. As people who didn't matter enough to search for. Before you continue reading, I need to ask you something. Have you subscribed yet? I know, everyone asks for subscriptions. But here's the thing, this story, what happened to Destiny and those other women, it almost got buried forever. Victoria Langford almost got away with it because people with money and power can make stories disappear. The only reason we're talking about this now is because enough people paid attention. Enough people cared. Your subscription means these stories keep getting told. It means the next time someone tries to silence the truth, we have a platform to speak from. So please, hit that subscribe button. Not for me. For Destiny. For every person whose story deserves to be heard. Okay, back to what happened next. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello. You stupid girl. Victoria's voice was hoarse, raw. Do you have any idea what you've done? I walked away from Ethan and the cameras, my hand gripping the phone so hard my knuckles went white. I know exactly what I've done. I've made sure the world sees who you really are. You've destroyed everything. She was crying now, her perfect composure completely shattered. My marriage, my reputation, my life. All because you couldn't accept that your sister left. Destiny didn't leave, I said coldly. You killed her. And based on what the police are finding right now, she wasn't the first. I didn't, Victoria's voice broke. I never meant for any of this to happen. She found something she shouldn't have seen. She was going to tell people. I had to. She stopped abruptly, realizing what she'd just said. Keep talking, I said. Please. Tell me more about how you had to kill my sister. No. Her voice changed, became calculating. You're recording this. You're trying to get me to confess. I don't need your confession, Victoria. The police are literally digging up bodies from your garden right now. Your confession won't change what they find. Silence. Then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. How many? How many what? How many did they find? The question sent ice through my veins. You don't know? You buried them, and you don't remember how many. It wasn't like that, Victoria said, and I could hear her unraveling in real time. They were accidents. Confrontations that went too far. That first one, she was stealing from us. She threatened to go to the police with lies. Charles was away, and I snapped. I didn't plan it. And after, I didn't know what else to do. The rose garden was being renovated anyway. It was supposed to be temporary, just until I could figure out how to. How to what? How to get away with murder. You don't understand the pressure I was under. Victoria's voice rose to a shriek. Everyone expects perfection. Perfect wife, perfect hostess, perfect everything. And Charles is never here. He's always traveling, always choosing his business over me. Those women, they worked in my house, they saw my life falling apart, and some of them, they threatened me. They said they'd tell people about the drinking, about the pills, about the times I lost control. I couldn't let them destroy everything I'd built. So you destroyed them instead. I protected myself. Victoria was sobbing now. I protected my marriage, my position, everything I've worked for my entire life. And you've taken it all away with one stupid video, one moment of. She stopped. In the background, I heard raised voices. Men shouting. The sound of a door opening. Mrs. Langford, we need you to come with us. A male voice, authoritative. A cop. No, Victoria said. No, I'm not going anywhere. I didn't do anything wrong. Those women, they... Mrs. Langford, you have the right to remain silent. The phone went dead. I stood there, hands still holding the device to my ear, my entire body numb. She'd confessed. Not just about destiny, but about others. About a pattern of violence that spanned years. And I'd recorded every word. My hands were shaking as I saved the recording, backed it up to 3 different locations, and then forwarded it to Detective Vaughn's email with the subject line, Victoria Langford's confession. When I walked back to Ethan, he took one look at my face and said, "What happened?" She called me. She confessed. To everything. Jesus. He pulled me into a hug, and that's when I finally started crying. 5 years of holding it together, of being strong, of focusing on the investigation, and suddenly it was all crashing down on me. We got her, I said into his shoulder. We actually got her. You got her, Ethan corrected. None of this happens without you. Without you refusing to let destiny be forgotten. By evening, the news was everywhere. Police had discovered 4 sets of human remains in the Langford Rose Garden. Victoria had been arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder. Charles Langford had released a statement claiming complete ignorance of his wife's actions and was cooperating fully with investigators. The media had the confession I'd recorded. It played on every channel, Victoria's voice describing murders like they were inconveniences she'd had to handle, her complete lack of remorse making even hardened reporters look ill. The 4 women they'd found so far were being identified through dental records and DNA. Destiny was one of them. The others were Elena Rodriguez, Sarah Chen, and Jasmine Williams. All young. All had worked briefly at the Langford estate. All had disappeared between 2015 and 2020. All had been written off as runaways. That night, I went to the funeral home where they'd taken Destiny's remains. I needed to see her, or what was left of her, to make it real. Detective Vaughn met me there. "I'm sorry," she said, "for not looking harder the first time. For not believing you." "It's not your fault," I said, though part of me still blamed the entire system that had failed Destiny. "You're looking now. That's what matters." For what it's worth, we're reopening every missing person case connected to the Langford estate going back 20 years. We think there might be more. More women who'd been treated as disposable. More families who'd spent years searching for answers. "The confession I sent you," I said, "will it hold up in court? With everything else we have?" "Absolutely. Victoria Langford is going to prison for the rest of her life." I nodded, feeling nothing. Not satisfaction. Not triumph. Just emptiness where my sister used to be. They let me sit with Destiny for an hour. Her remains weren't much to look at, just bones and fragments after 5 years in the ground. But I talked to her anyway. Told her about the investigation, about the confession, about how I'd kept my promise to find her. "I'm so sorry I didn't get here sooner," I whispered. "I'm sorry it took 5 years." But the truth was, I wasn't sorry for the wait. Because the wait had given me time to build an airtight case. To gather evidence that couldn't be dismissed. To create a public spotlight that made it impossible for the Langfords to make this disappear. If I'd rushed, Victoria might have gotten away with it. By taking my time, I'd made sure she never would. The trial started 4 months later. In that time, the Langford case had become a national obsession. True crime podcasts dissected every detail. Documentaries were already in production. Victoria's face was everywhere, transformed from society darling to one of the most hated women in America. But before we got to the courtroom, there was something else I needed to do. I needed to understand why. Why Victoria had killed those women. What had broken inside her to make murder seem like a reasonable solution to her problems? What kind of person could bury 4 human beings in her garden and then sleep soundly in the mansion overlooking it? So I went to see her. The jail where they were holding Victoria pending trial wasn't designed for people like her. She'd gone from a 15,000 square foot estate to a 6x8 cell. From designer clothes to an orange jumpsuit. From being feared to being the one living in fear. Prison wasn't kind to Victoria Langford. The other inmates had seen the videos, heard the confession. They knew what she'd done. When they brought her to the visitation room, I barely recognized her. Her hair was dull and greasy, pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her face was bare of makeup, showing every line, every imperfection she'd spent thousands of dollars hiding. Her hands shook as she picked up the phone on her side of the glass. "Why are you here?" she asked. Her voice was flat, lifeless. "I need to understand something," I said. "Destiny texted me that night. She said she found something in the rose garden." "What did she find?" Victoria's laugh was bitter. "You came all this way for that? After everything, you still don't know? Tell me." She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not remorse. More like resignation. Like she'd finally accepted that there was no way out, no angle to play. "She found Sarah," Victoria said finally. "Sarah Chin. She'd worked for us 6 months before your sister. Smart girl. Graduate degree in economics. She was helping Charles with some research for an investment deal." My stomach turned. What happened to her? She figured out that Charles was embezzling from his own clients. Moving money through shell companies, cooking the books. She came to me, said she was going to report him unless we paid her. Called it a consultation fee. Victoria's expression hardened. I couldn't let her destroy Charles's business. Destroy our life. So you killed her. I confronted her in the garden. We argued. She threatened me. I pushed her. She hit her head on the edge of the fountain. It was an accident. Victoria said it like she was describing a minor traffic incident. But she was dead, and I panicked. The garden was being renovated. It was easy to bury her under the new rose beds. No one would ever know. Except Destiny did know. She found the body. Not exactly. She found the jewelry. Sarah was wearing this distinctive bracelet when she died. I tried to remove it, but it was stuck. I figured it would decompose eventually, along with everything else. Victoria's voice was mechanical now, detached. Your sister was planting new roses one evening. I told the staff not to work that bed, but she didn't get the message. She dug down about 2 feet and hit something. The bracelet. Still attached to bone. I closed my eyes, imagining Destiny's horror in that moment. The realization of what she'd uncovered. She came to me, Victoria continued. Scared, confused. Asking me what she should do. If we should call the police. And I knew. Her voice cracked. I knew if the police came, they'd dig up the whole garden. They'd find Sarah. They'd investigate. They'd discover what Charles had done with the money. Everything would come out. So you killed her too. I told her I'd handle it. That I'd call the authorities in the morning. I gave her tea with sleeping pills dissolved in it. Told her she seemed upset, that she should rest. And while she slept, Victoria stopped, her face crumbling. I made it quick. She didn't suffer. I made sure she didn't suffer. How generous of you, I said, my voice acid. You don't understand. Victoria's mask cracked completely. I had no choice. Once Sarah was buried there, I couldn't let anyone find her. And then after Destiny, I couldn't risk anyone else discovering what I'd done. Every woman who worked for us after that, if they seemed like they might be trouble, if they asked too many questions. You killed them and buried them in the roses. I protected my family. Victoria slammed her hand against the glass. I protected everything Charles and I had built. And now it's gone. All of it. Gone because your sister couldn't mind her own business. The rage that flooded through me was white-hot and consuming. My sister didn't do anything wrong. She found evidence of a crime and tried to do the right thing. You murdered her for that. You murdered 4 women, and you're sitting here acting like you're the victim. I am a victim. Victoria screamed. I'm a victim of Charles's betrayal, of his absence, of his crimes that I had to cover up. I'm a victim of a society that demands perfection from women while forgiving men everything. I'm a victim of... You're a murderer, I cut her off. That's all you are. A murderer who got caught. And I hope you spend every single day for the rest of your life thinking about what you did to Destiny. What you did to all of them. I stood to leave. Wait, Victoria said desperately. Wait. You wanted to understand why. Let me explain. Please. I should have walked away, but something made me sit back down. Victoria's eyes were wild now, desperate. I grew up poor. Not middle-class uncomfortable, but actually poor. Trailer park poor. My mother was a drunk, and my father left when I was 6. I swore I'd never live like that again. Never be powerless like that again. So I made myself perfect. Perfect body, perfect face, perfect manners. I transformed myself into someone a man like Charles Langford would marry. This isn't about your childhood. Yes, it is. Tears were streaming down Victoria's face. Everything I did was about survival. About maintaining the life I'd built. Charles was cheating on me. Did you know that? Multiple affairs. He was going to leave me. I'd signed a prenup that would have left me with almost nothing. 20 years of marriage, and I would have ended up right back where I started. So you murdered women to keep your lifestyle. I murdered women to keep from becoming nothing again. Victoria's voice broke. To keep from disappearing back into poverty and invisibility. They were going to take everything from me. Sarah with her threats about Charles's crimes. Destiny with her discovery of the body. The others who figured things out, who asked questions. I couldn't let them destroy me. I stared at this broken woman on the other side of the glass, and I felt nothing but disgust. You think your suffering justifies what you did. It doesn't. Everyone suffers. Everyone has trauma. Most of us don't turn into serial killers. I'm not a serial killer.
Victoria pretested.
Serial killers enjoy it. I hated it. Every single time, I hated what I had to do. Had to do, I repeated. You didn't have to do anything. You chose to kill rather than face consequences. You chose your comfort over their lives. And now you'll spend the rest of your existence in a cell, being exactly what you were most afraid of becoming. Nothing. I hung up the phone and walked out, Victoria's screams following me down the hallway. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. The bodies. The confession. Testimony from former employees about Victoria's violent tendencies and obsessive control over the Rose Garden. Financial records showing that Charles had indeed been embezzling, giving Victoria a motive to cover up Sarah Chen's threats. The defense tried to argue temporary insanity, claimed Victoria had been suffering from an undiagnosed mental illness exacerbated by her husband's infidelity and business crimes. They painted her as a woman driven mad by circumstances beyond her control. The jury didn't buy it. They deliberated for 7 hours. When they came back, Victoria was convicted on 4 counts of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. I was there when they read the verdict. I watched Victoria's face crumble as each guilty verdict was announced. Watched her attorney put his head in his hands. Watched Charles Langford, who divorced her 2 months into the trial, walk out of the courtroom without looking back. But more importantly, I watched the families. Elena Rodriguez's mother, who'd spent 8 years believing her daughter had abandoned her. Sarah Chen's brother, who'd hired private investigators and depleted his savings searching. Jasmine Williams's partner, who'd never stopped hoping she'd come home. We stood together as the verdict was read, holding hands, united in grief and relief. Justice had finally come. But it was hollow. Because justice couldn't bring them back. Couldn't give us back the years we'd lost. Couldn't erase the trauma of knowing how they died, how they'd been buried like trash in a garden, how they'd been forgotten by everyone except the people who loved them. After the trial, I did something I'd been planning for months. I used the money from a book deal about the investigation to establish a foundation. The Destiny Jones Foundation, dedicated to investigating missing person cases involving women of color that had gone cold. Because Destiny wasn't the only one the system had failed. There were thousands of women like her, like Elena and Sarah and Jasmine, who'd disappeared and been written off. Who'd become statistics instead of people. The foundation would make sure they weren't forgotten. We hired private investigators, forensic specialists, and lawyers. We worked with families to keep cases active, to generate media attention, to pressure police departments to keep searching. We offered rewards for information and support for families navigating the nightmare of having a missing loved one. Within the first year, we helped solve 12 cold cases. 12 families got answers. Not always the answers they wanted, but closure, truth, justice. It didn't bring Destiny back. Nothing would. But it meant her death had created something meaningful. Something that would help others. And maybe that was enough. The morning after my conversation with Victoria in jail, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Detective Vaughn. When I called her back, her voice was tight with urgency. "We need you to come to the station. Now." "What's wrong?" "Just get here." 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Vaughn and 3 other detectives I'd never seen before. Their expressions were grim. "Charles Langford wants to make a deal," Vaughn said without preamble. I felt ice slide down my spine. What kind of deal? "He's willing to testify against Victoria. Provide evidence of her crimes. Help us build an even stronger case. In exchange, he wants immunity from prosecution for his embezzlement charges."
No.
The word came out hard and flat. Absolutely not. "Miss Jones, I understand your feelings, but—" "Do you?" I leaned forward. Charles Langford created the situation that led to Sarah Chen's death. His crimes are what Victoria was trying to cover up. He's not innocent in this. Legally, he didn't kill anyone, one of the other detectives said. And his testimony could help us uncover more victims. He's claiming Victoria confessed things to him over the years. Things about other women who disappeared. The room tilted. Other women? Beyond the 4 we found. Vaughn nodded slowly. He says there might be as many as 7 more. Women who worked at the estate before 2015. Before they had security cameras. Before there were digital records of who came and went. 7 more. 7 more families who'd spent years wondering. 7 more women buried like trash in locations only Victoria knew. "What does he want from me?" I asked. "He wants you to agree to the deal. Says he won't cooperate unless the families of the victims approve. He's trying to control the narrative, make himself look like he's doing the right thing. He's trying to save himself from prison." "Yes," Vaughn agreed. "But he also has information we need. Without his testimony, we might never find the other victims. Their families might never get closure." The choice was impossible. Let Charles Langford walk free, or let 7 families keep searching forever. I thought about the 5 years I'd spent not knowing where destiny was. The torture of wondering. The hope that kept me awake at night. The fear that hollowed me out during the day. The constant state of limbo between grief and denial. Could I condemn other families to that? Could I let them keep suffering just to make sure Charles Langford faced justice? But could I let him walk away? This man who'd stolen from his clients, who'd created the circumstances that led to multiple murders, who'd known what his wife was and stayed silent. "I need time," I said. "We don't have time," Vaughn pressed. "Charles's lawyer says the offer expires in 48 hours. After that, he's not talking. He'll take whatever sentence comes and keep Victoria's secrets to protect himself from being seen as an accomplice." "So he's blackmailing us?" "Essentially, yes." I stood up, my legs shaking. "I need to talk to the other families. Elena's mother, Sarah's brother, Jasmine's partner. They deserve a say in this." "Amara." "No," I cut her off. "You're asking me to make a choice that affects all of us. I won't do it alone." I called them that afternoon. Maria Rodriguez, Elena's mother. David Chen, Sarah's brother. Taylor Williams, Jasmine's partner. We met at a coffee shop far from Belmont, away from the media circus, away from the cameras and the questions. Maria spoke first. She was in her 60s, her face carved with grief that had aged her beyond her years. "My daughter has been gone for 9 years. 9 years of not knowing. If this man can tell us about others, about more families suffering like we have, how can we say no?" "He's a criminal," David said. He was younger, maybe 30, his jaw tight with anger. He covered up his crimes by letting his wife become a murderer. He should be in prison too. "But he will be in prison if we say no and he stops talking," Taylor pointed out. They were non-binary, soft-spoken, carrying grief like a weight on their shoulders. "He'll get time for the embezzlement eventually. But those other families won't get their answers." "Exactly," Maria said. "At least Victoria is going away forever. At least she's facing justice. If we can use Charles to help other people find their loved ones, isn't that worth something?" I listened to them argue, watched them struggle with the same impossible choice I was facing. There was no right answer, only versions of wrong. I think, I said slowly, we need to consider what our loved ones would want. Destiny was studying to be a nurse. She wanted to help people. If she could speak now, would she want us to help these other families find peace, even if it meant letting Charles walk? The table went quiet. Elena was the same way, Maria said softly. Always putting others first. Always trying to fix things. Tears streamed down her face. She would hate the idea of other mothers suffering like I have. Sarah was practical, David said. She would have looked at the math. One guilty person going free versus 7 families getting answers. She would have said the math is clear. Jasmine would have wanted justice, Taylor said. But they also would have wanted to end the suffering. They couldn't stand seeing people in pain. We sat there in silence, each of us wrestling with our grief, our anger, our desperate need for something good to come from this nightmare. Finally, I spoke. I think we agree to the deal. But on one condition. What condition? David asked. Charles Langford has to face those families personally. He has to tell them what he knows, where to search, everything. And he has to do it on camera, on record, so there's no way he can take it back later. He doesn't get to hide behind lawyers and make statements through the press. He faces what he helped create. Maria nodded slowly. Yes. He should have to look at what his silence cost. I can live with that, Taylor agreed. David took longer, his hands clenched into fists on the table. But eventually, he nodded too. Okay. But if he's lying, if he's manipulating us, I want him prosecuted to the fullest extent. Immunity deal or not. I called Vaughn from the parking lot. We'll agree to the deal. With conditions. She listened as I laid them out. Charles had to provide the information on camera. He had to face the families. He had to give specific locations, names, any detail he had. And if any of his information proved false, the immunity deal was void. I'll present it to his lawyers, Vaughn said. But Amara, you should know this won't be easy. Hearing what Charles has to say, it's going to be painful. Everything about this has been painful, I said. At least this pain might lead somewhere. The meeting was scheduled for 3 days later in a conference room at the police station. Charles Langford arrived with 2 lawyers flanking him like bodyguards. He'd lost weight since I'd last seen him at the trial, his expensive suit hanging loose on his frame. His hair had gone almost entirely gray. He looked like a man who'd been living in fear. Good. The families sat on one side of a long table, Charles and his lawyers on the other. Cameras recorded everything. Vaughn and her team stood against the wall, watching. Charles wouldn't meet our eyes. Mr. Langford, Vaughn said formally, you've agreed to provide information about additional potential victims in exchange for immunity from prosecution in your embezzlement case. This statement is being recorded and will be part of the official record. Do you understand? I understand, Charles said. His voice was hoarse. Then please begin. Charles took a breath. When he spoke, he still didn't look at us. Victoria told me about the first one in 2013. A woman named Rebecca Miller. She'd been working as our estate manager for 6 months. Victoria said she'd discovered Rebecca stealing jewelry. They argued in the garden, and Victoria pushed her. Rebecca hit her head on the fountain edge. She died instantly. Maria made a sound like she'd been punched. I reached over and took her hand. Victoria panicked, Charles continued. She called me at my office. I was in a meeting with clients, and she was hysterical. Said she didn't know what to do. I told her to call the police, that we'd figure it out. But when I got home, Rebecca was already buried in the rose garden. Victoria had done it herself. Why didn't you report it? David's voice was sharp as glass. I was afraid, Charles said simply. Afraid of what it would do to our reputation, our business. Afraid of being implicated as an accessory. So I helped her cover it up. Brought in new soil, new roses. Made it look like a renovation project. You chose your reputation over a woman's life, Taylor said. Charles finally looked up, meeting Taylor's eyes. Yes. And I've regretted it every day since. Regret doesn't bring them back, I said coldly. Keep talking. Over the next 2 hours, Charles detailed 7 more cases. 7 women who'd worked at the estate between 2013 and 2019. Most of them young, most of them Black or Latina, all of them people the system had failed to search for properly. Rebecca Miller, 2013. Estate manager. Died after confrontation about alleged theft. Monica Davis, 2014. Housekeeper. Discovered Victoria's pill addiction. Threatened to report it. Lisa Park, 2015. Personal assistant. Found evidence of Charles's affairs. Victoria killed her to keep the marriage intact. And on and on. Each name was a person. Each death was a choice. Each burial was a calculated decision to prioritize the Langfords' comfort over human life. Where are they? Maria asked when Charles finally stopped talking. Where did she bury them? Rebecca and Monica are in the rose garden with the others you found. The rest are at our summer property in the mountains. Victoria had a meditation garden there. It was her private space. No staff allowed. You knew, David said, his voice shaking with rage. You knew for 11 years that there were bodies buried on your property, and you said nothing. I was protecting my wife, Charles said. You were protecting yourself, I corrected. Victoria's crimes gave you leverage. As long as she was a murderer, she couldn't divorce you, couldn't expose your embezzlement, couldn't do anything that might lead to investigations. You kept her secrets because they kept you safe. Charles's face crumbled. I know what I am. I know what I've done. I'm trying to make it right now. This isn't making it right, Maria said, standing up. This is trying to save yourself. But at least now those families will have answers. At least now we can bring those women home. She walked out. The rest of us followed, leaving Charles and his lawyers in the conference room with their immunity deal and their cameras and their carefully constructed redemption narrative. Outside, I stood with the other families in the parking lot, all of us silent, all of us processing what we'd just heard. 7 more, Taylor said quietly. 7 more women who didn't matter enough to keep searching for. They matter now, I said. And we're going to make sure everyone knows their names. Everyone knows what happened to them. That night, I went back to my apartment and pulled out the folders I'd compiled on the Destiny Jones Foundation. We'd helped solve 12 cases in our first year. Now we'd be bringing home 7 more women, giving 7 more families the closure they'd been desperately seeking. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. I thought about the choice we'd made, letting Charles walk free in exchange for the information. Part of me hated it. Part of me would always wonder if we'd done the right thing. But then I thought about those 7 families, about the calls they'd be getting soon. The news that their loved ones had been found. The funerals they'd finally be able to hold. The grief that could finally move forward instead of staying frozen in terrible uncertainty. Maybe that was justice too. Not the kind that came with prison sentences and convictions, but the kind that came with truth and closure and the knowledge that someone had cared enough to keep searching. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan, Mountain Property Search starts tomorrow. I'll be there. You should come. I stared at the message for a long time. Did I want to be there when they found more bodies? Did I want to see more evidence of Victoria's cruelty, more proof of how many lives had been destroyed? But I thought about Rebecca and Monica and Lisa and all the others. They died alone, been buried alone, been forgotten alone. Someone should be there when they were finally brought home. Someone should witness their return. I texted back, I'll be there. The Langford Mountain property was 3 hours north of Belmont, accessible only by a winding private road that cut through dense forest. The media wasn't allowed past the main gate, but Ethan had secured permission to document the search as part of his investigative series. I rode with him and his cameraman, watching the landscape change from coastal plains to mountain peaks, feeling my anxiety build with every mile. "You don't have to do this," Ethan said for the third time. "You've already done more than anyone could ask." "Those women deserve witnesses," I said. "They deserve people who care about them being present when they're found." The meditation garden was at the back of the property, surrounded by tall pines that blocked most of the sunlight. It should have been peaceful. Instead, it felt oppressive, like the trees themselves knew what secrets the ground held. Forensic teams had already set up their equipment. Ground-penetrating radar, excavation tools, evidence collection materials. Detective Vaughn was there, coordinating with the medical examiner's office. "We've identified 3 distinct sites so far," she told me when I approached. "Charles's information appears accurate. We should have confirmation within a few hours." I nodded, not trusting my voice. The first body was discovered at noon. The team moved carefully, methodically, treating the remains with dignity and respect. When they confirmed it was human remains, a hush fell over everyone present. "Female, approximately 20 to 30 years old," the forensic anthropologist announced. "Based on position and depth, consistent with burial approximately 8 to 10 years ago." Rebecca Miller. It had to be. By evening, they'd found all 7. 7 women who'd been reduced to secrets, buried in a garden designed for peace and contemplation. The irony was grotesque. As they worked, I stood at the edge of the clearing and made calls. 7 families who needed to know. 7 conversations that started with, "We found her," and ended with me trying to hold myself together while they fell apart on the other end of the line. Rebecca Miller's mother sobbed so hard she couldn't speak. I stayed on the line until her husband took the phone, until I could confirm they understood what came next, what the process would be. Monica Davis's sister screamed. Just screamed, raw and primal, the sound of grief that had been held back for too long finally breaking free. Lisa Park's father was silent for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then he whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for not giving up." Each call broke something in me and rebuilt it slightly different. By the time I finished, I was sitting on the ground, back against a tree, staring at nothing. Ethan found me there as the sun was setting. "They're finishing up for the day. They'll transport the remains to the medical examiner tomorrow for formal identification." 11 women, I said. 11 women dead because Victoria Langford couldn't handle being told no. Couldn't handle anyone threatening her perfect life. 12, Ethan corrected gently. "Don't forget Sarah Chin. She was the first one Victoria killed intentionally." 12. 12 lives ended. 12 families destroyed. All because one woman decided her comfort mattered more than their existence. "Charles is giving interviews," Ethan said, positioning himself as a victim of Victoria's manipulation, saying he lived in fear of her, that he wanted to come forward but was too scared. Of course he is. I felt something cold settle in my chest. He gets immunity and gets to play the victim. Meanwhile, Victoria sits in prison as the monster, and he walks away as the man who finally did the right thing. "Public opinion isn't buying it," Ethan offered. "People see through his act. The comments online, they're calling him a coward, saying he's as guilty as she is. But he's not going to prison," I said flatly. "He's going to rebuild his life while 12 families bury their daughters." "So make sure he can't rebuild," Ethan said. "You have a platform now. The foundation, your interviews, the documentary. Use it. Make sure everyone knows exactly what Charles Langford is." He was right. The legal system might have let Charles walk, but public opinion was something else entirely. In the age of social media, reputation was currency. And I could make sure Charles Langford's reputation was worth nothing. Over the next 2 weeks, I did 47 interviews. News shows, podcasts, documentary crews. I told Destiny's story and the stories of the other 11 women. I showed photographs, read their last messages to loved ones, described their dreams and hopes and the futures that had been stolen from them. And in every single interview, I made sure to mention Charles Langford. Not with anger or accusation, but with calm, factual statements about his knowledge, his silence, his choices. I let the facts speak for themselves. The public response was immediate and overwhelming. Charles's business partners abandoned him. His country club membership was revoked. Clients sued him for the money he'd embezzled. The immunity deal protected him from criminal prosecution, but it couldn't protect him from civil liability or social consequences. Within a month, he'd filed for bankruptcy. Within 2, he'd moved out of Belmont entirely, unable to show his face in the town where he'd once been respected and feared. Victoria's trial for the additional murders was scheduled for 6 months after the first verdict. Her lawyers tried to argue that Charles's testimony should be excluded because he'd received immunity, but the judge disagreed. The facts were the facts, regardless of the deal that brought them to light. I attended every day of the second trial. Sat in the front row with Maria, David, Taylor, and the families of the newly discovered victims. We became a unit, bound together by grief and determination to see justice served. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. Charles's testimony. Forensic reports. Financial records showing Victoria had paid a private investigator to help her dispose of evidence. Testimony from former staff members about her violent outbursts and obsessive control. The defense tried everything. Claimed Victoria was mentally ill. Argued she'd been abused by Charles and acted out of trauma. Suggested the deaths were accidents and the cover-ups were panic responses. The jury didn't buy any of it. Victoria was convicted on 7 additional counts of first-degree murder. The judge ordered the sentences to run consecutively. Even with the possibility of parole eventually, Victoria Langford would spend the rest of her natural life in prison. When the verdict was read, I felt Maria's hand squeeze mine. Felt Taylor lean their head on my shoulder. Felt David's quiet sob from my other side. "It's done," Maria whispered. "It's finally done." But it wasn't done. Not really. Because while Victoria would spend her life in prison, 12 women were still gone. 12 families still had to learn to live with their loss. The foundation still had hundreds of other cases to investigate, hundreds of other families searching for answers. Justice had been served, but the work was far from over. The night after the verdict, I went to Destiny's grave. They'd buried her 6 months earlier in a small ceremony with just family and close friends. Her headstone was simple: Destiny Jones, 1997 to 2020, beloved sister, friend, and future nurse. I sat on the ground beside it, running my fingers over the engraved letters. "We got her," I said to the silence. "Victoria will never hurt anyone again. And the foundation is helping other families find their people. We've solved 23 cases now. 23 families who got answers because you couldn't be forgotten." The wind rustled through the trees. I imagined it was destiny, listening, approving. "I miss you every day," I continued. "I miss your laugh and your terrible jokes and the way you'd call me at 2 a.m. to talk about whatever random thing you just learned. I miss having a sister. I miss having you." My voice broke. "But I'm proud of what came from your loss. Proud that your death, as horrible as it was, led to justice for so many others. Proud that your name is now attached to a foundation that helps people. You wanted to be a nurse, to help people heal. In a way, you're still doing that." I sat there until the sun set, until the cemetery lights flickered on, until my legs went numb from sitting cross-legged on the cold ground. When I finally stood to leave, I placed a single white rose on Destiny's grave. The same kind Victoria had planted over the bodies of her victims. But this rose wasn't hiding anything. It was honoring someone, remembering them, keeping them alive in memory and action. "Rest easy, sis," I whispered. "I've got it from here." 1 year after Victoria's final conviction, the Destiny Jones Foundation held its first annual fundraising gala. We'd grown from a small operation in my apartment to a full organization with staff, offices, and satellite locations in 3 states. The event was held at a hotel in Belmont, the same town where Victoria had once been feared and untouchable. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Over 300 people attended. Families we'd helped, donors, volunteers, law enforcement officials who'd partnered with us, and journalists who'd covered the story. The ballroom was decorated simply, with photographs of the 23 women and men we'd helped bring home displayed on screens around the room. I stood at the podium in a simple black dress, looking out at the crowd, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness. Not yet. But peace. Thank you all for being here tonight, I began. A year ago, this foundation was just an idea born from grief and rage and a desperate need to make meaning from loss. Today, it's a living organization that has helped 23 families find answers. 23 people who were missing are now home. Applause filled the room. I waited for it to die down. But there are still thousands of cases unsolved. Thousands of families waiting for answers. Thousands of people who disappeared and were written off because society decided they didn't matter enough to keep searching. I looked directly at the cameras recording the event. That ends now. With your support, with your donations, with your willingness to share these stories and keep these cases visible, we will find them. All of them. More applause. I stepped back from the podium as Maria Rodriguez came forward to speak about finding Elena, about the closure the foundation had given her family. After the speeches, after the dinner, after the auction that raised over $2 million for the foundation, I found myself on the hotel balcony, looking out at the Belmont coastline. The same view Victoria had once enjoyed from her mansion. The same water, the same sky, the same stars. But everything else had changed. Quite a night, Ethan said, joining me. He'd been instrumental in the foundation's growth, using his platform to share our stories and keep pressure on law enforcement to take missing persons cases seriously. I keep waiting for it to feel real, I admitted. For it to sink in that we actually did this. That Destiny's death led to something good. It is real. And it is good. Ethan leaned against the railing. You should be proud. I am. But I also feel guilty. I turned to face him. Is it wrong that I'm successful now because my sister was murdered? That I have a platform and respect and resources because of the worst thing that ever happened to me? You didn't choose this path, Ethan said gently. Victoria chose it when she killed Destiny. You just decided that if you had to walk this road, you'd use it to help others. That's not wrong. That's remarkable. My phone buzzed. A text from Detective Vaughn, new case. 19-year-old woman missing from Monroe County for 3 months. Family says police aren't taking it seriously. Interested. I showed Ethan the message. What are you going to say? He asked. I typed back, send me everything you have. Because that was the work now. Case after case, family after family, person after person. The work would never truly be done. There would always be someone missing, someone searching, someone who needed help that the system wouldn't provide. But now there was also the foundation. Now there was a team of people who cared. Now there was resources and attention and determination. Now there was hope. Over the next 6 months, the foundation helped solve 9 more cases. We expanded to 5 states. We hired more investigators, more lawyers, more support staff for families navigating the nightmare of having a missing loved one. We also launched an education program, teaching people about the early warning signs of abusive relationships, about how to document evidence if they suspected something was wrong, about resources available if they needed help. Victoria's case had revealed a pattern: isolation, control, escalating violence. If we could teach people to recognize those patterns early, maybe we could prevent the next Victoria Langford from creating more victims. I also started speaking at law enforcement conferences, pushing for better protocols on missing persons cases. Better training on how to investigate when the victim is from a marginalized community. Better systems for keeping cases active instead of letting them go cold. The work was exhausting. Some days I wanted to quit, to go back to being a normal person with a normal job and a normal life. But then I'd get a call from a mother whose daughter had been found, whose body could finally be buried, whose killer would finally face justice. And I'd remember why I was doing this. Not just for Destiny. For all of them. On the second anniversary of Destiny's death, I visited her grave with flowers and news. The foundation helped solve 43 cases this year, I told her. 43 families who got answers. 43 people who came home. I arranged the flowers in the vase by her headstone. I'm dating someone. His name is James. He's a forensic psychologist who volunteers with the foundation. You'd like him. He's kind and patient, and he understands why I can't just move on from all this. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the oak tree shading her grave. I'm not angry anymore, I said softly. I mean, I'm still angry at Victoria, at Charles, at a system that failed you and so many others. But I'm not consumed by it anymore. I'm not defined by it. I'm defined by what I've built from the ashes of losing you. I sat in silence for a while, just being present with my grief, letting it exist without trying to fix it or move past it. I love you, Des, I finally said. And I'm going to keep doing this work in your name. Keep fighting for people the system has forgotten. Keep making sure no one else disappears without someone searching. As I walked back to my car, my phone rang. The foundation's main number. This is Amara. Miss Jones, my name is Patricia Morales. My daughter Carmen disappeared 3 weeks ago in Portland. The police say she probably just left town, but I know something's wrong. I've heard about your foundation and I was hoping, her voice broke. I was hoping you could help me find my daughter. I got in my car and pulled out a notebook. Tell me everything, I said. Start from the beginning. And as Patricia told me about Carmen, about the last time she'd seen her, about the fear she couldn't shake, I thought about Victoria Langford sitting in her cell. About Charles Langford living in obscurity somewhere, trying to rebuild a reputation that would never recover. About the 12 women whose names were now memorialized at the foundation's headquarters. About Destiny, whose death had sparked a movement to help people like Carmen. This was the work. This would always be the work. And I was ready for it. So that's my story. That's how a waitress destroyed a dynasty and changed her life in 72 hours. But more than that, it's the story of how grief can transform into purpose, how justice doesn't always come from courts, and how the people society decides don't matter can change the world when someone refuses to let them be forgotten. The Destiny Jones Foundation is still operating today. We've helped solve over 200 cases. We've reunited families, brought closure to grief, and put multiple killers behind bars. We've changed laws, improved police protocols, and created a network of resources for families navigating the nightmare of having a missing loved one. And it all started because I refused to let my sister's death be meaningless. Because I walked into a restaurant with a plan and 6 words that made a monster finally face consequences. Because sometimes, justice wears an apron and carries a notepad and refuses to be invisible anymore. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Thank you for caring about Destiny, about the 12 women Victoria killed, about the hundreds of other people we've helped bring home. Your attention matters. Your support matters. Every view, every share, every donation keeps this work going. And if you're watching this because someone you love is missing, because you're searching for answers and the system has failed you, please reach out to the foundation. We're here. We're listening. And we won't stop looking. Because everyone deserves to be found. Everyone deserves to come home. And no one should ever be forgotten. Subscribe to this channel to hear more stories like this. Stories about people who refused to accept injustice, who fought back against systems designed to protect the powerful, who transformed their pain into purpose. Hit that notification bell because next week, I'm sharing the story of how a single mother exposed her wealthy ex-husband's secret second family and brought down his empire. And trust me, the ending will leave you speechless. Thank you for being here. Thank you for witnessing. Thank you for remembering. And Destiny, wherever you are, I hope you know your story mattered. Your life mattered. And the work we're doing in your name will keep mattering for as long as I'm breathing. Rest in power, sis. We did it.